the skies above Faerun, they used to belong to Netheril. Netheril's enclaves drifted like islands of stone and crystal, their spires piercing the clouds. From their heights, Arcanist-shaped storms pulled fire from the void and bent the land below to their vision. This was Netheril, the Empire of Magic. Among them stood Jixiter, the Enclave of Shadows, ruled by a king whose genius was whispered even among his peers, Larloch. He was more than an Arcanist, more than a sovereign. He was an architect of dominion. His greatest creation, the Death Moon Orb, was not a weapon of war, but a means of control. With it, he bound his court, ensuring loyalty through magic that chained their wills, as opposed to oaths or trust. Among the great arcanists of Netheril, Karsus sought godhood, Iuleom sought to master mythos, countless archwizards sought glory in conquest. Larloch's obsession took another path: preservation. To hold power perfectly, to ensure nothing ever slipped beyond his grasp. Why would such a king abandon life itself? Was it devotion to the art? That endless well of magic Netheril's arcanists worshipped above all? Or was it the terror of being forgotten, of watching empire and memory fade like dust? In secret, Larloch began his final working, the ritual of lichdom. Bone ground to ash, breath surrendered to eternity, soul bound into a phylactery no hand could break. Larloch did not look to the gods, or even the hells, for this bargain. He looked at the art. He treated immortality like a calculation, a way to simply outlast the erosion of the years. The day he finished that ritual, Larloch ceased to be a man. He became something else, the first step into an eternity no mortal was meant to endure. The fall of Netheril was sudden. A single spell, undone an empire. When Karsus raised his hand against the goddess of magic, when he drew divinity into his mortal flesh, the weave itself unraveled. Enclaves halted, mythos wavered, and then, one by one, they fell. Enclaves lost their power and plummeted like burning stars. Whole cities shattered against the earth. The world shook with the death of an empire. For when even sky cities fall, nowhere is safe. Yet, a figure remained, already beyond death. Larloch mounted his dragon and fled Jixidor as it cracked apart. From above, he watched Netheril dissolve into ruin, the collapse of all he had once been a part of. The sorcerer kings, who had been his rivals and peers, were gone. Karsus destroyed by his own arrogance. Iuleom lost beneath the earth. The people of Netheril vanished in flame and shadow, but Larloch endured. And in that survival, he became something else, something even more than a lich. He became the last witness of a world that no longer existed. Was this triumph or a curse? To live on, bearing knowledge no other soul possessed, when everything and everyone he had ever known had turned to ash. Though when Larloch turned to lichdom, he had already made this choice. The choice of eternity meant that this was the inevitable outcome. No empire lasts forever. Larloch would eventually be the last of his people. Because of Karsus's folly, this eventuality became real in an instant. Larloch could have used the fragments of Netheril to build something new, but he chose to settle in the wreckage. Instead of seeding a new empire from the remains, he began a long, slow harvest of its ghosts. He sought out Orbital, a fallen enclave once devoted to peace, and transformed that sanctuary of harmony into the seat of the Shadow King. From broken towers, he raised new spires of black stone, talons clawing against the sky. The waters around the citadel glowed in eerie green, poisoned by necromancy, while bone bats circled endlessly overhead. What rose was not quite a castle, not quite a city, but something more dreadful. This was Larloch's Keep, a jagged complex the realms eventually came to fear as Warlock's Crypt, a name born from the slow corruption of his own. The interior halls function as a massive silent reliquary. Larloch filled these chambers with 60 bound liches and a standing army of decaying trolls, creating a kingdom of the dead where the only loyalty is the kind forced by his will. Yet, Larloch was not the only survivor of Netheril, nor even the only lich. Orbital had once been ruled by Ragalath the Ageless, another who endured beyond death. When the two met, power clashed with power, and it was Larloch who triumphed. Instead of obliterating a rival, Larloch chose a more calculated cruelty by shackling Ragalath and forcing him into service as his scribe. In his servitude, the scribe of Larloch was meant to chronicle the history of Netheril, yet this servitude turned the study of history into a labor of propaganda. Every chronicle produced had to pass through Larloch's jealous editing before reaching the monks at Candle Keep. He filtered every memory and reshaped every word, forcing the legacy of an entire empire to bend to his specific whims. Larloch claims to preserve Netheril, but this is a hollow kind of conservation. In Warlock's Crypt, he sits as the sole arbiter of a dead world. He alone preserves the fragments of Netheril. He alone commanded a court that would never betray him, could never die. Yet what he built was no empire of magic, but a tomb, a ghostly reflection of what once was. And so the question lingers, did Larloch save the memory of his people, or bury it alive within the halls of the dead? If Warlock's Crypt was a tomb, it was one lined with treasures beyond imagination. Tomes in forgotten tongues drifted through the air like leaves in a storm. Emerald light seared across runes etched into black stone. And at the heart of this library sat Larloch, his skeletal form crowned with the constellation of Ioun stones, each pulsing with thoughts. It was here that the greatest powers of Faerun would come to bargain. Some sought his wisdom, others his artifacts. Most never returned. Adventurers who entered Warlock's Crypt vanished, their names scratched into local tavern walls as warnings rather than legends. Even the Red Wizards of Thay, bold in their arrogance, tested the Shadow King. 16 archmages marched into the crypt, seeking to unmake him. 15 fell. The 16th, Saz Tam, understood what the others did not. Against Larloch, survival lay in humility. He bargained, and in return was allowed to leave. But Tam was not the only prominent figure to strike a bargain in Warlock's Crypt. Manchun, founder of the Zentarium, sought secrets in exchange for fealty, and in his endless hunger for relics of Netheril, Larloch bartered away artifacts of staggering might. The Death Moon Orb, Thakor Sil's throne, weapons that could have unmade kingdoms. To Larloch, they were nothing but coin, traded for spells, secrets, and fragments of knowledge he could not reclaim alone. Yet for every bargain struck, the prison walls closed tighter. Larloch claimed to stand apart from the petty politics of Faerun, but his hunger for knowledge and Netherese relics bound him to it. His hand reached into Thay, Zentil Keep, Candle Keep, and beyond. The more he dealt, the more inescapable the web became. And so the question hangs, was Larloch the master of these bargains, the spider at the heart of the web? Or was he their prisoner, a relic of Netheril desperately trading away the present for scraps of a vanished empire? In time, the name Larloch faded from the maps and settled into the folk tales as a warning. Bards whisper that to sing the Warlock King too near his crypt was to invite abduction, a one-way trip where your voice is stolen to feed the silence of the crypt. Over the centuries, his history calcified into myth, leaving only a shadow stretched across the face of Faerun. And yet, within the endless dark of his mausoleum, there were moments that broke the mask of terror. When Storm Silverhand crossed his path, she brought the silver fire of Mystra with her. In a rare moment of lucidity, the Shadow King confessed that her presence was the first kindness he had known in an age. Could you imagine it? The Shadow King, draped in black robes, leaning forward toward her fire with wonder, not unlike a child. For a heartbeat, the Lich who had outlived empires remembered what it was to be human. But wonder faded to hunger. By the year of the Rune Lord's Triumphant, 1487 DR, Larloch's reach grew higher than relics and mortal secrets. He sought to touch the weave itself, stretching his will towards Candlekeep's wards and the mythal of Myth Draenor. He was trying to seize the mastery of magic in its purest, most untouchable form. Yet here too he was cast back. Elminster and SCRY-DOS herself rose against him. The Shadow King's grasp broken, and the perfection he craved slipped away once more. This is his final irony. The most feared Lich in the realms and the Last Arcanist does not hunger for kingdoms or crowns. He yearns for a perfection that he cannot touch. And so, he lingers. He remains forever an outsider at the threshold, watching the fire of life and magic, never able to step into its warmth. In the highest tower of Warlock's Crypt, the Shadow King waits, bone-draped in finery, a soft corona of emerald motes around his form. A constellation of Ioun stones circling endlessly. Around him, silence, a throne room of dust and memory. Larloch has endured where gods themselves have fallen. He commands an empire of the dead. He hoards relics that should not exist. Even Saz-Tam, the dread Zilkir of Thay, whispering his name with fear. And yet, beneath all his victories lies the same truth. He is not the ruler of Netheril reborn, but its last ghost. His preservation is his prison, his immortality cage of his own design. Larloch endures beyond all others, yet in all his unending years, has he mastered the art, or has he only exiled himself from it? Please do let me know what you think of these questions.